Hello friends and welcome to another session of English literature. So friends, as you can see in the screen that today's topic of discussion is film studies. And from film studies, in this session I'm going to discuss what is film adaptation, its brief history, and what are the various types or theories of film adaptation according to various critics. So friends, at first we have to know that what is film adaptation. So friends, you all know that what is film. Film is a kind of audio-visual presentation and adaptation means adapting something. So in many cases the film or the story of the film is basically based on the story of a literature or a literary piece. And when the story of one literary piece is transmitted to film, then it is called film adaptation. Film adaptation means the transfer of a written work to a feature film. Literature provides the raw materials for film adaptation to create new visual forms and thematic contents. Now we have to know that what is the history of film adaptation. So adapting material or stories from some origin is not something new that the film industry had invented, because classical Greek playwrights long ago adapted myths that had been passed in through oral tradition. And as soon as the makers of cinema recognized that telling a good story in moving picture required a good story, so they started adapting story from novels, from plays, from short stories and from any type of fictions. Thus the adaptation of novels, plays and short stories became commonplace. So now we have to know that what are the elements of a good adaptation. So actually a good film adaptation need three elements, that drive the reader's or the spectator's positive evolution. So number one is fidelity to the story, and then second one is creative addition, means music, actors, places, and the third one is the temporal media distance between reading the book and watching the movie. So here the first one is fidelity to the story. Here fidelity means a kind of truthfulness or a kind of faithfulness, a kind of justice to the story of the literary piece. And then the second one is creative additions, means how the music is justified, how the actors perform, and how the places in the film match to the story. And the third one is a kind of distance between reading the book and watching the movie. It means that while reading a story, we visualize the things or the events in our mind, right? But here the main thing is that when we read one book or one story, then that is called the written communication. And when we engage ourselves in watching the movie based on the same story that we read, that is called spoken and visual aspects of communication. So here that's the thing. So up next we have various kinds of film adaptation theories. Louis Giannetti states in Understanding Movies. So Understanding Movies is a kind of book by Louis Giannetti. So in that book he states three kinds of adaptation. First one is literal adaptation, second one is faithful adaptation, and the third one is loose adaptation. After this we have Rachel Malchow. So in Reevaluating Fidelity, Film Adaptation in the Language Arts Classroom, Rachel Malchow discusses various types of adaptation, such as the displaced setting, acculturated adaptation, which is quite important, the politicized adaptation, and the radical homage. After this we have Geoffrey Wagner's Theories of Adaptation. So in the book called The Novel and the Cinema, Geoffrey Wagner states about three types of adaptation. First one is transposition, second one is commentary, third one is analogy. So after this we have another one, Doodly Andrews in the Concepts in Film Theory also states many categories of adaptation. First one is borrowing, second one is intersecting, third one is fidelity and transformation. So now we have to read or understand these theories briefly, So at first we have Louis Giannetti's three kinds of adaptation. So at first we have literal adaptation. It means that the story of the film must be as original as the original text, and the plot, the character and even the tone of voice are also written as close to the original text as possible. So in this type of adaptation, the purpose is to recreate the tone of the literary work in a cinematic form. So this is called the perfect type of adaptation. So up next we have faithful adaptation. So faithful adaptation is a work that tries to maintain closeness to the original text. So now we have loose adaptation. So the films that would have lightly relied on the source texts are fall under the category of loose adaptation. It means that when a film claims that it is based on the story of some literary piece, but basically the film lightly maintain the closeness to the original text is called loose adaptation. Up next we have the detailed description of the Rachel Malchow's adaptation theories in Reevaluating Fidelity film adaptation in the language arts classroom. So at first we have the displaced setting. So in this category, when a film retains the original language but the film makes changes in setting, that type of films are called the displaced setting. Then we have acculturated adaptation. As I said before that this one is quite important. So what is this? The acculturated film adaptation basically retains the general scheme of character, plot and theme of the original text, okay? But it innovates the language and setting of the original text. For example, we all know the story of Hamlet by William Shakespeare, and when this story of Hamlet has been used by any Indian filmmakers in their films, then that is called acculturated adaptation, because in William Shakespeare's Hamlet the language was English and the setting was in England, but when this story of Hamlet is adapted by one Indian filmmaker, then the language changed from English to Hindi or another language, and from England to the places of India. So that is called the acculturated adaptation. Friends, we all know about the film Haider by the renowned director Vishal Bharadwaj. So Haider is called acculturated adaptation, okay? So now we have politicized adaptation. So this type of adaptation retains generally fidelity towards the original text but works on a theme in a different way in order to make political statement, okay? So now we have the fourth one, which is the radical homage. So this type of adaptation makes use of innovative and unusual adaptations of the original text. It means that it innovates the original text, okay? So now we have Wagner's theories. So at first we have transposition. So in this case, or in this type of adaptation, the film is a direct copy of the original text. So it resembles like the literal adaptation by Jeon. Okay, now we have commentary. So in a commentary, the film follows the text but has slightly altered elements. And now we have analogy. So in an analogy, the adaptation is very loosely based on the text and many come across as a different piece itself. So it is a kind of loose adaptation. So now we have Doodly theories of adaptation. At first we have borrowing. So in this kind of adaptation, the filmmaker relies on the credibility of the name of the source work and thus adapts it into a film. So it's a kind of borrowing something, okay, borrowing the source work. Now we have intersecting. So in this kind of adaptation, the filmmaker purposefully tries to reflect from the original. And thus, though being a film adaptation, this type of films leave the viewers dissatisfied. So now we have fidelity and transformation. This kind of adaptation allows the filmmaker the freedom of interpretation. It demands that the crux of the original should be retained in the film. Doodly in the concepts of film theory points out that this is a different task to adapt, since most critics believe that the literary and the cinematic media are different, and therefore capturing and portraying the spirit of the text is difficult in this sense. So here it means that in this type of adaptation, the filmmaker can interpret the events in the film by retaining the crux of the original text. Okay, so these were the various types of adaptation or film adaptation according to various critics. So friends, these things are very important for film studies. So I hope this video will help you. So thank you so very much for watching, and if you have any queries on any topic of English literature, then please comment me so that I can make a video of it. So bye bye for now. See you in the next session very soon.